Hello everyone and welcome to day 6 of the 20-day flower creation journey, a foundation for watercolor floral painting. Today, following the flower color guide, we are going to paint a carnation, which is a beautiful flower similar to a rose but a little bit more pointy and a little bit smaller. I will paint carnation flowers using a small filbert brush. This is a Princeton Select in size 8. And I'm going to use my Winsor & Newton watercolor paintings. I'm gonna mix on my color palette a little bit of Scarlet Lake and a little bit of Yellow Ochre. I'm going to use the side of my brush and I will start from the center of the carnation to start to create small brush strokes, all leading towards the same center. I'm going to use the side of the brush to create small strokes and the belly of the brush to create strokes that are a little bit thicker. I'm going to dip into the cup of water my brush to remove part of the pigment, and then I'm going to keep creating these brush strokes all around, keeping in mind that this flower has a quite round shape and let's say a pointing end towards the bottom of the flower, so we'll keep this in mind to create an overall shape that resembles the carnation. When I talk about color value, I mean to say that the color, the type of color stays the same, but we change how light or how dark the color is based on how concentrated is the amount of pigment on our brush. Therefore, in order to change the color value, you need to dip into the cup of water your brush in order to remove a little bit of color. In this way, your composition will look overall more interesting and you will be able to achieve overall a very different effect. I'm proceeding creating the flower number 2, and as I did for the first one, I start from the center. I create some small brush strokes in the center with the side of my brush, and then I keep creating thicker brush strokes all around, and I change the color value of the red that I have on my brush, and I keep creating overall this round shape, keeping in mind that each and every carnation has a pointy base. Therefore, we keep this in mind to create all of these flowers. In this moment, I am creating all of these petals using the side of my brush and the belly of my brush, and I keep using a more concentrated pigment to refine the petals that are inside this round shape and also the petals that are in the outer part of this carnation. When you use the side of the brush, such as a filbert brush, you will be able to achieve much thinner brush strokes. Therefore, you will have more control on the pigment that you are going to lay onto paper. In this moment, I'm starting to create the carnation number 3 on the paper. I'm following a little bit the picture that I have on my left side, but I position these carnations all over the page in the way that seems more appropriate considering the amount of white space that I have. At this point, I'm creating this pointy base of this carnation, and I keep in mind to create other petals on top of the carnation in order to keep having this round shape that resembles a rose. I keep using a mixture of Scarlet Lake with just a little bit of Yellow Ochre, and when I wanted to add a little bit of contrast, I just use Scarlet Lake as it is. I proceed at this point creating another carnation in the upper left part of the paper, and I follow the same process. So I start from the center of this flower, and using the side and the belly of my brush, I keep creating these little strokes that are these petals in the inner part of the carnation. I keep changing the color value and I keep creating these strokes, keeping in mind to give a pointy base to this carnation. Following the reference picture, I'm creating different carnations and I'm also trying to give different perspectives to all of these flowers. So for example, the last one I've created is turned towards the upper left corner of the page, while this one I'm creating now is facing the upper part of the paper and is just a straight carnation. So during this 20-day flower creation journey, all these exercises we are doing, we are going to repeat oftentimes the same flower all over the page, and I hope this can be for all of you a great exercise to practice your brush strokes several times all over the same composition. I'm creating at this point the last carnation because there is a little bit of more white space on this page. Therefore, I thought, why not? We can add a last one on top. And I'm creating a very small one that is also facing the upper part of the page and it's pretty straight. So I'm creating this triangular shape because this is how I find the perspective looking at the reference picture. And I'm adding now a little bit of more concentrated Scarlet Lake to the internal and some of the external petals to give this triangular shape to this flower. I'm pretty happy with the outcome of the flowers so far, but what I need to do now is to start to create the base of these flowers, which, if you can notice from the picture, has a sort of triangular and elongated shape at the base of the flower, under which the stem starts and goes until the bottom part of the page. So this is what we are going to reproduce. And I'm going to use a round brush from Princeton in size 6, but you can use any brush you feel comfortable to use. I'm using this one because I have the feeling that a round brush gives me the precision that I want in this moment. So I'm using the tip of this brush and I put a little bit of pressure onto the belly of the brush to start to create these triangular shapes at the base of the flowers. I create the base and then I fill it with the green that I'm using. In this case, it is a mixture of sap green and green earth. You can use any green you have available and you can add, for example, a little bit of yellow, as I'm doing, to create different hues, that means different colors, to give to this composition different look. I keep in mind to use the paper as a perfect medium to create some contrast, but also to create some white spaces that help anyway the observer to understand what we are creating. And these white spaces, as also for the flowers, but also now for the base of these flowers, are going to create an active part of the composition to give contrast, but also to create definition. I keep using a mixture of green with a touch of yellow lemon dip to add some accent strokes in a bright green, where I have already created the base of these carnations. I keep refining the base of these flowers, giving the shape as I see it in the book, and that resembles exactly the shape of carnations in nature. I keep using this round brush because I think I can obtain more precise strokes. And therefore using a mixture of green with a little bit of red to create this green a little bit more muted, so not as bright as the sub-green usually is, I started to create with a very thin tip of my brush the stem of all of these carnations. The stem starts from the center part where this triangular shape, let's say where the base of this carnation is, and you just start to drag this thin line down to the bottom of the page. As this is a loose style composition, I like also my stems to be quite defined but not completely precise and not completely well defined. This is up to you. You can decide to use the same technique and the same style, but you can also decide to create these stems much more defined. When it's time to create the leaves, I use the same brush and I create some brush strokes by pressing and releasing the pressure on the belly of this brush. So I find a spot, I press and I release the pressure from the belly of the brush up to the point, the tip of this brush. I think a round brush in size 6 is the perfect brush to use to create these leaves that are pretty small in size. Considering the size of the paper you're painting on, of course you can use different sizes of brushes to create these leaves and stems and overall composition. I keep refining and creating these final leaves, and I use a mixture in this case of pure sub-green in order to create some leaves that have a different hue. That means a different color compared to the leaves that I have created in first place. I add now a little bit of red as I did in the first place, and also a little bit of blue. I mix it with the sub-green, and using the mop brush I've created this darker green. It's a different hue, different type of green, and as you know, I like to add these accent colors that are darker to bring a little bit of vibrancy to this composition. So I just touch with the very tip of my mop brush the stems and the base of these carnations. Why do I use a mop brush, you might ask? The reason is that the mop brush has a very thin point that I think can be used very freely in this case, but also because I think the mop brush compared to the round brush gives me the ability to be more loose. The round shape brush has the potential to create strokes that are very precise, and in this stage of my composition where I'm just adding some accent strokes, I want these to be just very free, very loose, and the brush that I can use to achieve this best result is indeed the mop brush. So I keep adding these brush strokes in a darker green where I have created all the base of the carnation and the stems. At this point, with the tip of the same brush, I started to give to the flowers some more definition. I achieved this by using the tip of the brush and by creating some bright strokes and thin strokes with this scarlet lake mixed with a little bit of magenta sometimes all around the center of the carnation and also the outer petals. You can decide to add these brush strokes as well onto your composition, but if this is something that you're not familiar with doing, you're not willing to add to your composition, feel free to stop at this point and just enjoy the composition you've created. I personally like to add these brush strokes, not in all my composition, but depending on the subject that I am painting. I think that some composition can really benefit from these brush strokes added at the end of the composition. If your paint is completely dry, as I am doing now, these brush strokes at the end will stay as they are, so super well defined, and will not blend with the wet paint underneath because everything is completely dry. But if you are instead adding some brush strokes while your painting underneath is still wet, then in that case the new brush strokes will blend with the underneath paint and you will achieve beautiful wet in wet effects. So with this composition, let's say we have practiced a little bit of wet in wet, but now we are also practicing a little bit of wet on dry technique. I keep creating these brush strokes using the same colors that I've used to create the base of these carnation flowers. But you can use any color, and you can also decide to use colors completely different altogether to add some of these brush strokes. But in my case, I really thought this was the best outcome, so to use Scarlet Lake and a little bit of yellow ochre. At this point, the composition is completed. I'm rinsing my brushes and looking at the overall outcome of this composition. I'm really pleased. I hope you enjoyed painting with me. See you in the next video.